a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday. It is Sunday, November 11th, 2022. It is NFL Week 10. It is the Shark and the Gun. It is the Circa Millions 2022 NFL competition, top plays, hype, analysis, and conversation. It is Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. Guns picks, clearing his throat, sunglasses on. What's going on this morning, my brother?
I don't know what you wrote. Let me clear my throat on a beautiful, absolute beautiful Sunday. It's a little bit chilly here in Maryland, but hey, that's what you get in November. Just came back from the Notre Dame win versus the Navy midshipmen, so I love seeing that. But we're only talking about NFL. I was 6-1-2 last week on the plays, and I'm going to be cooking with absolute gas today, and we have some alignment on a bunch of plays as well. So stay tuned. Thanks for joining us, and make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's go.
Absolutely. As you said, a beautiful, beautiful morning here on the East Coast. First play, we're going down south, and we're going to South Beach, and we're going to the road locker room here. The Cleveland Browns come in here with what I like to call an opportunity to dominate. My guy RJ Paul in the chat knows it. We know it. Let's go. Guns picks. Cleveland Browns come in here on the road, 3-5 on the campaign, off a big win in their last game in primetime in the division against Cincinnati Bengals. I think that's a precursor, a telltale sign of a team on an upward plane, of course, getting their quarterback back in a few weeks, but nonetheless, very representative at 3-5. Guns picks, an official.
Man, I'm loving the Browns in this spot on the road, plus 3.5. Listen, they are coming off a bye. But you actually look at the splits of how these teams perform. Miami at home, plus 3-point differential, only plus 2 net yard average at home. So they basically play to the level of their competition. But you look at Cleveland on the road, minus 1 point differential, plus 82 net yard average. So a couple outliers there. You could have been on the positive side for the Cleveland Browns. But Cleveland should look to take advantage of a weak pass game for Miami. They give up 246 yards per game, 68.5% completion rate to their opponents. And lately, they've also been exposed in the run game, giving up 4.8 yards per carry to their opponents. Last 4 games. So I like to look at samples of how the teams are performing lately. Miami, plus 2-point differential, plus 87 net yard average. But look at the competition who they played. They played Minnesota. I guess Minnesota is 7-1 straight up, 8-1 straight up. You have Pittsburgh, Detroit, even Chicago. I mean, these aren't great opponents here. So, and if you actually look at the Cleveland side, they have a minus 2-point differential, plus 50 net yard average. But look at the competition they played. The LA Chargers, New England Patriots, Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals. A lot of these teams are playoff contenders here, folks. So Cleveland, I think, has played a stronger strength of schedule lately than the Miami Dolphins. Also, Miami 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 games alone, and Cleveland has covered the last 3 as a dog. So Cleveland coming off a bye, they should be well rested, well prepared, and I think it's going to be one of those situations. You may even see Cleveland win this one outright. I'm getting the 3.5. I'll take the 3 in the hook. Give me the Browns plus 3.5, and that's a 2-unit play for me.
Absolutely love it. And as I mentioned every week here, these plays for me at this point in time are Circa Millions officials. And I want to make this point with emphasis. We are doing even more homework than we were doing weeks 1 through 6 when we were putting our hard-earned American money on this. And of course, the buy-in for this tournament is $1,100. So when I say this is an unofficial play, I really want to make this point because it's very important. This is a big time play for us. So don't think that this is some half-ass shit. And I'm putting a hat on. The buy hat is engaged. We're on this into competition, and we're going down to South Beach. But, jumping off of what Guns Pick said, I think a very important point here is looking at point differential. And I had mentioned this on the show with Jay regarding another game, and I just looked at this regarding this game. This is astounding stuff. The Cleveland Browns come in here 3-5 straight up on the campaign, 2 games under 500 with a plus 1 point differential. So when you look at 2 metrics and you cross-reference each other, and this is a little snapshot to sports gambling in general, you can use this in any sport. When you look at the flat record and you look at the point differential, if there's a noticeable gap and it's telling a very disconnected story, one of those angles is going to move versus the other. And what this is telling you is that the Cleveland Browns are purely undervalued at 3-5. And you go to the other side of this game, you find something that is just absolutely amazing. You find the Miami Dolphins here at 6-3, 3 games over 500 with a minus 11 point differential. So it's astounding stuff. And then you start to go through the schedule and you look at Cleveland here. Cleveland really played one bad game all year. They got hammered at home against New England in week 6, 38-15. But other than that, you got a 3-point loss at Atlanta. Atlanta is representative, to say it mildly. The Chargers at home, a 2-point loss, coin flip loss. At Baltimore, 3-point loss. And of course, before the bye in week 8, a blowout win at Cincinnati. And you go back to early season, win against Carolina on the road, and a home win against Pittsburgh, and a really egregious backdoor loss against the Jets, where at the time, we didn't think the Jets were really that good. The Jets are pretty damn good. So that's not even a bad loss. And the final point here, you go through their 3 road games. This will be their 4th road game of the year. Outright win at Carolina, 3-point loss at Atlanta, and a 3-point loss at Baltimore. You're getting 3.5. You're on a great line number. They talk about key numbers in NFL football. This is a great line spot, and Miami is trending downward. We're on this in the competition. I would not talk you guys off playing this not because I'm not officially on it. This is a big-time play. Cleveland Browns plus 3.5, 1 unit. Guns picks. We're moving on here. We're going down to Tennessee. You find the Tennessee Titans coming in here on what you would call a heater. And a heater is a gambling term. It doesn't apply to NFL football. What it applies to is an ATS streak, where a team is not obliterating the opponent. That wouldn't be a heater. That would be a class above. Tennessee's not a class above. They are getting very fortunate. You get the Broncos coming in here on the road. Russell Wilson, time to turn up. Hackett and the boys need to find some juice here. Guns picks plus 2.5, an official.
I need Russell Wilson to take that spicy Subway sandwich, take a huge bite of it, and let's ride with the Denver Broncos here. I like Denver Broncos here plus 2.5. They're coming off a bye week with a win over the Jags in London, 21-17, plus 26 net yards. It's good that they had that week of rest after the London game instead of like Green Bay, for example, having to go and play in the next week. So Tennessee off a tough road loss, 20-17. But when you go into the stats, they should have been crushed by 40 in this game, minus 270 net yards in that game. They got absolutely dominated by the Kansas City Chiefs. Now you got Denver's strength. That's their defense, obviously. They hold their opponents to 288 yards of total offense, plus 141 net yard average overall, which is pretty impressive considering the Denver offense hasn't really produced for them all season long. Denver versus non-divisional opponents, plus 75 net yard average, 0-point differential. Tennessee versus non-divisional opponents, minus 6-point differential, minus 142 net yard average. So you see in 2 different sides of the coin here. You have Denver going on the road, plus 2.5, with a Tennessee team that is consistently losing the net yardage, but getting lucky in terms of the scoring outcome. I think that's going to flip here in late season play as we're getting into it in week 10. I'm going to be taking Denver plus 2.5 off the rest, 1.5 unit special.
Yeah, and we align in this competition with Denver plus 2.5. And Jay Money and I had been on here on Thursday afternoon talking about this. And I know Jay Money is traveling cross country. The man he is, my partner in NBA. All respect to Jay. I hope he's having safe travels. But he said, and I'll say this by proxy, somebody else said this on the Wager Talk, but Jay Money, 2-unit banger here, 2-unit special, the first one of the year. So I'm fully aligned with it. And of course, the gun is as well. And we're on it in the Circa competition. And again, this is a point differential game. You look at Denver here, they're minus 11 on the campaign, and they're 3-5. Tennessee is 5-3 at minus 9. So again, the team has basically an identical point differential, but there's a huge gap in the standings. Denver is a buy spot versus the league, and they're more specifically a buy spot when you cross it with the opponent being a fade, given their own metric dispersion there. And you start going through the schedule. I mean, Denver, of course, did win their most recent game pre-bye in London against Jacksonville, a late score to get there 21-17. But you go back to the previous 3 weeks. I mean, an overtime loss to the Colts at home on Thursday Night Football in week 5, an overtime loss to the Chargers, and then a real dud effort, probably the bottom point of their entire season, a 16-9 home loss to the Jets. But again, key point, you have to adjust your expectations in NFL football very quickly. They only play 18 games. So everything changes very, very quickly. I think the Jets are a pretty damn classy team. So I don't think that 16-9 loss is as bad as people think. And now, of course, you come back here and you get Tennessee, who is 6-0 ATS last 6, coming off a very representative final result, a 2017 loss against Kansas City on Sunday Night Football. Malik Willis was there. Ryan Tannehill's coming back this week. I'm not sure how much that helps. I think, obviously, if you're forcing a guy back in the lineup, we're not sure if he is 100%. I don't know if that helps at all. And you really go through the Tennessee schedule. Tennessee, as I mentioned before, they're on a heater. They're not demolishing teams. 24-22 over Vegas. 24-17 over a very, very low Indianapolis team. 21-17 against Washington. Goal line pick by Carson Wentz. Washington could have won that game. 19-10. Colts again. 17-10. Houston. And then, of course, the game last week against Kansas City. So they're beating up on very lackluster divisional opponents and getting lucky in tight windows. Now you come back to where they don't function particularly well at home as a home favorite outside of the division. Going back to week 1, we did fade Tennessee with the Giants. Giants did win the game 21-20. I think Denver wins the game outright today. We're on it in the competition at +2.5. Guns picks. We are going to Kansas City, and we're going to, again, the road locker room here. Jacksonville Jaguars coming here 3-6 on the campaign. But again, situational evaluation here. Numerous losses. I believe 6 straight losses leading up to last week's win by inside of 7 points. So now you get a Chiefs team coming in here, and I talk about this all the time. Teams are showing signs of a win or a loss. I think Kansas City is showing the signs of a loss. Obviously, a loss at a -9.5 would be a surprise to most, but I do think the Jaguars have significant merit here today. Guns picks, an official.
If anything, the Jaguars are pesky as hell. I was like, if you look at all their games this season, they basically lost by 7 points or less in most of those occurrences, or at least a touchdown or less with a 2-point conversion. But I'm going to be taking Jacksonville +9.5. This is one of my top plays this week, along with the Browns as a 2-unit play. Look, Jacksonville coming off a comeback win versus the Las Vegas Raiders at home, +82 net yards for the game. So they actually did dominate that game down in the first half and made a miraculous comeback to win that game. Now, KC is coming off a Sunday Night Football win over the Tennessee Titans, 20-17, and they dominated, like I said before when we were doing the Tennessee cap, +270 net yards. But if you actually look at the splits, KC is just a better road team than they are at home. They have a 0-point differential at home, which is kind of astounding. But when you go on the road, the point differential drastically changes. They're actually +13-point differential on the road. And they only have a +31 net yard average at home. So they're basically playing to the level of their competition when they play at home. Now you got Jacksonville. They stay close with a lot of teams. Like I said before, they have a +1 point differential on the road, -34 net yard average. They have lost none of those games by a touchdown or less, like I said before. Also, KC at home, 0-4 against the spread in their at home this season, and they are 0-6 against the spread versus AFC opponents. So KC has a potential look-ahead spot as well. If you actually want to get into it, they have a hot divisional opponent in the LA Chargers next week, which was a close game when they played each other in Kansas City. I think that if there's look aheads in the NFL, this would kind of fit one. It's not the main reason why I'm taking this. It's more predicated on the fact that KC plays a level of competition at home, and Jacksonville will stay with you all the way, even though their record doesn't show it. So I'm going to be rolling with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm getting 9.5. Thank you very much, Books. And it's a 2-unit special.
Completely agree. And I wish I had a Jags hat to put on because I'm fully aligned with this play. And again, you have to look at what's been going on here for Jacksonville since week 3. And I think the week 3 opening point here is very important because the week 3 was their best road environment of the entire season. Not coincidentally, at the AFC West. Sunday, September 25th, 38-10 blowout at the Chargers. Then you came back in a road back-to-back sequence at Philadelphia. And, of course, Philadelphia, undefeated, the class of the NFC and maybe the entire sport right now, came out on the road hot in Philly, 14-0 before losing their energy late and not covering 29-21. Came home off the road sequence, which, of course, was a letdown spot theoretically versus travel, fatigue, and obviously a couple big road environments prior, and really laid an egg at home against Houston in the division in week 5. Went on the road to Indianapolis, got backdoored, late touchdown to, I believe, Alec Pierce, Matt Ryan, one of his last games with the Colts. That game was down to the wire. The Jaguars could have won that game. And then, of course, a real tight one against the Giants, also could have won that game. A real tight one against Denver, also could have won that game. And finally did get off the schneid last week at home against Vegas. But moral of the story here is this team lost 5 straight games. Every single game was potentially winnable. So they become a bye element. And as Gunn said, historically, when Kansas City is laying big numbers over a touchdown at home, I don't have the direct statistic in front of me, but since Mahomes, Andy Reid, these guys became championship status and they were laying these big figures, they're not very good ATS at home, and they're very good on the road. And Guns, you said you're trying to figure out why. I have a theory as to why. I think, to a certain degree, teams like Kansas City know they're going to January to begin with. So they don't take every game seriously. And 2, in the back of their mind, they know how hostile their crowd is for the opponent. So they subconsciously don't have to bring their A++ game for every single week. Playoffs is a different story at home, but getting out of their, coming out of their garage, their driveway, driving to the stadium, they know they're going to win these games at home. They just don't have the motivation to blow them out. Go on the road, they don't have their crowd, they got to turn up. They get a road warrior mentality. They find more focus on the road. And as you mentioned, the splits this year are really astounding. And one real crucial point here, which I've mentioned numerous times for Kansas City, for whatever reason, has just played incredibly well on the road at the NFC, scoring 44 points at Arizona, 41 points at Tampa Bay, and 44 again out west at San Francisco. This is not where they function well. I think Jacksonville may be a bit of a reach to say they win this game. This game is going to be tight. We're on it at +9.5. Next one, we're going to Buffalo here, coming back up north. And you guys know how much I love Josh Allen Campaign 5. We had a scare last week. We had a little bit of a slingshot arm. I think deflected. He hit his elbow or something off of a defender. Nonetheless, he is starting today. This game did drop to 3.5 midweek. I think people were obviously speculating he might not play. Case Keenum might play, et cetera, et cetera. However, Guns picks. Talk to me on this game as I grab this beautiful hat right next to me.
I actually picked up Buffalo -3.5 when I thought Case Keenum was going to be the starter for Buffalo. And then I got the gift saying Josh Allen is going to start, and the line shot up to 6.5. But hey, I still like the number at 6.5. Anything under a touchdown is a gift with Josh Allen playing. Listen, especially with look at the situation for the Buffalo Bills here. They're coming off a tough loss versus a divisional opponent on the road, the New York Jets. I think they were a double-digit favorite in that one, 20-17. But it looked like Josh Allen had that elbow injury, and it kind of probably affected his play in that game. Minnesota is coming off a non-divisional road win, probably a game they didn't deserve to win, but Washington kind of handed them that game in a gift basket. In the fourth quarter of last week. They won 20-17, but they were down late, like I said. Minnesota, not a great road team. We talked about this last week when we talked about the Washington Commanders cap. They averaged 20 points per game on the road, -101 point differential. They're not a great road team, even though their record says that they're 7-1, 8-1. That doesn't really dictate how they perform on the road. Now they got Buffalo at home. They average 35 points per game, +129 net yard average. They hold their opponents to a whopping 9 points per game at home. They absolutely dominate in this spot. Now Buffalo is hit. If you want to even go into the totals a little bit, Buffalo has hit 6 straight unders, while Minnesota has hit 3 out of the last 4 road games have hit the under. So I do lean on the underside on this one, but I'm more focused on the game. Also, Minnesota is on their 3rd road game in 5 weeks, going up against Buffalo off a tough loss. It's just a situational play. I did get it at -3.5, but I'm telling the people right now, as today, I would still take it at -6.5. It's a 1.5 unit play for me, and I do lean the under 44.5.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to unpack here, but You're looking at a bye environment. It's a beautiful print. It's a beautiful afternoon to be in Orchard Park, New York. A suddenly not so casual 7-point Sunday, November 13th, 2022. It is Sharky Waters Nation. 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave, get out of the water. And staying course here, you're just finding an incredible fade spot of the opponent here. You're getting Minnesota coming in here on a dub 7. This is the longest winning streak in this season outside of the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, this is not representative of championship football. These wins have come at home against Detroit, in London against New Orleans, at home against Chicago, in Miami against a backup quarterback versus Arizona, who is confusing and lackluster, and at Washington with a backup quarterback. So you get 2 backup quarterbacks. You get a London game against another backup quarterback, if we're being honest there. And you get 2 divisional games against very lackluster opponents. And, you come in here in a road back-to-back sequence. A game last week, they very easily could have lost. And the theme of this broadcast is definitely where teams are clustering in the past 5, 6, 7 weeks, and it should come the other direction for the next 3 to 4 to 5 weeks. Minnesota Vikings are really the top of that conversation here. This team is ready to lose a game. There's just no way around it. And who better to hammer them and check this quality than Josh Allen Campaign 5 at home off of a road loss. And I think when you look at Josh Allen coming home here, obviously only the 4th home game of the year. They have played more road games in the early going. That will reverse in the second half of the season. But Tennessee Titans blowout 41-7. Pittsburgh Steelers blowout 38-3. And Sunday night, October 30th, 27-17, Aaron Rodgers did backdoor there, which centers me on this point. I think when you're betting this game, you do want to center on the first half as well. Buffalo loves to come out in the first half. And for those of you guys who watch their home games, it's a noticeable thing. Like we talked about a heater for the Titans being kind of luck, more or less. This is not luck for the Bills. The Bills at home come out to kick your ass. And they come out with pace. Their play calling is highly aggressive. The energy is there. It's very much college football oriented, where, Guns, you know this very well. In college football, teams really come out with that passion, so they outcompete you. And that's not an NFL thing. NFL is so tight. There's so much parity. It's rare that you find a team that really does, in the regular season specifically, come out just to obliterate you. That's what the Bills do at home. And again, we're not going official anymore on this season, but this is where you guys want to be taking the Bills. First half -3.5, game 6.5. This is big time stuff today. Let's fucking go. And Guns picks, speaking of dominating, let's go to East Rutherford, New Jersey, MetLife Stadium here, out of conference, out of division game. Giants come back home here, 6-2 on the campaign, 3-1. Couple corollary spots outside the division prior versus these bottom feeders. And Texans come in here 1-6-1, 1-3 on the road. Guns picks. Talk to me.
Yeah, this was a game that I was trying to find a way to get to the Texans, and I just kind of scared myself away from it. So you look at these 2 spots. You have the Giants sitting at home +2 point differential, -33 net yards. Where you have the Texans in a different type of spot. They're -5 point differential. -80 net yards. So it's not like they're playing any different from home versus away. It's just a Texas team that stinks. You have this number sitting around 4.5, 5, which is kind of a strange number. Typically in those situations, I try to find a way to get to the dog. You have a Giants team coming off a loss, 27-13 on the road. They're hitting back home, a place where they've actually won 3 straight at home. It's just not a spot I want to take the Texans right now. The Texans are one of the worst teams in the NFL. They got a backdoor cover on Thursday Night Football. They got a little bit more rest, but the Giants are coming off a bye. So it doesn't really predicate any sort of situational spot for me to even take the Texans, nor would it be a spot where I want to ever take the Giants at -4, -5. So this is a complete pass for me.
Yeah, I don't love the number at 4, as you mentioned. That's definitely a key number to fade, theoretically, just over the field goal. But I do think you find a spot where you would want to lay the points with the Giants here today. As you mentioned, the Texans are really just the bottom feeder of the entire league. And you go through a few road games, which I think are important. Go back to week 7. We had suggested on this broadcast, I think you might have taken it officially, I'm not sure, at Las Vegas. that Vegas would hammer them on a -6.5, 7. Vegas, obviously, theoretically far worse than the Giants, beat them 38-20. And when I mentioned this the other day, a couple of people said to me, it was a backdoor, this, and that. And I always say this, guys, there's no real backdoor in NFL football. They only play 60 minutes a week. Everything is highly condensed into one 60-minute window of chaos. So it's going to come early or late. Like it's hard to have that conversation in NFL football because, again, there's just no sample. So, of course, it's going to be scattered as hell at all points in the game. So if they beat them 38-20, they beat them 38-20, period, in my opinion. And I think that does cross-reference with what the Giants could do today. And I don't think we're talking about a 58-point outcome here. But I do think when you go back through the Giants' home schedule against these teams, which I just mentioned before, out of division lackluster opponents, go back to week 2. They were laying 3 points or 2.5, depending on what CLV point you got there, 19-16 cover or push. A couple weeks later, week 4 against Chicago, 20-12 cover on a 3. I think you're going to see a similar type of game. I think you're going to see a lower scoring game. I think the Giants would be the lean here. The Texans do not score the ball well on the road. And as Guns mentioned, you get a little mini buy low for the Giants. We had suggested, Guns had it officially, that Seattle would be the spot in week 8, catching the Giants in what at that point in time was really brutal travel. They had been in London, they had been home, they had been in Jacksonville, and then they finished this 4-week chaotic travel up north in the Pacific Coast in Seattle. That was a dead zone spot, so let that be there. They bottomed out. It's gone. Take a week off. Now they're in a totally new environment. This is the start of a new environment. So I think this is a buy spot for the Giants from that energy standpoint here. We're not on it, but we would not talk you guys off the Giants here. Next one, we're going divisional game, Lions at Bears. This game, I think, is taking on a significant amount of difficulty. Obviously, both teams come in here with very similar records. Lions 2-6, Bears 3-6. Bears' first divisional home game of the year. All their home games so far have been outside of the division. Lions, one representative effort on the road. Guns picks, little comments, and then we can keep it moving.
Yeah. The problem with Detroit is, from my perspective, if Detroit's playing at home, I'm going to look at them a little bit harder. But when they're playing on the road, they just haven't performed to any sort of level whatsoever. They're minus 17 point differential on the road, -9 net yard average, which is kind of interesting too, because they have a minus 59 net yard average at home, but they have a +1 point differential, which is, I thought that was kind of interesting to look at there. Going against their division, they do have a +1 point differential, -46 net yard average. But this is a Chicago team that is kind of hungry for a win, I think. They played their guts out against Miami last week, I thought, and they actually put up a ton of rushing yards. And you're going against a Detroit defense that really gives up a ton of yards, especially on the ground, 5 yards per carry on the ground. And they're susceptible to the pass too. And I think Justin Fields is progressing as a quarterback, getting better at the pass, but he still likes to, run versus try to throw the ball. This is not one of the spots I'd want to jump on Detroit whatsoever. And I think the public is going to be really jumping on the Bears. If I had a lean on this one, it doesn't really matter what the public or the sharps are on this one. But I think Chicago's a lean, but it's nothing that I'm going to be stepping in front of.
Yeah. This is just a tough game. I mean, there's no way around it. There's a couple standout points here. You get a generational buy spot theoretically for Detroit. They've been hammered. I believe they've lost 7 out of 8 to Chicago, dating back, of course, different quarterbacks, different coaching. But it does stand for something, because it's something that, when coaches look back and they try to motivate their team, they will say to the guys, this is our divisional opponent, and they've owned us for 4 years now. And it's not so much about, because people always say, it's a new roster, it's this and that. Yes, it is, but still, it's the mentality, it's the building, it's the energy, and they will make an emphasis point. We got to get off this schneid against these guys, and they're a rival. And I do think a key point here, when you go through the Detroit schedule, as I mentioned, Chicago has not had a divisional home game, so we're not sure how they function at home in the division this year. But Detroit does have one road game in the division, and that was week 3 at Minnesota. And I think a very intelligent point here. It was a very similar spot, actually. The previous week, in week 2, Detroit had won outright against Washington. Then they went on the road, and I think a lot of people, including myself, I actually lost that bet. I had Minnesota in week 3. I thought, okay, Detroit just won a home game. Now they're going to get demolished on the road. They didn't. They were up 24-10 in the middle of the third quarter, covered the game 28-24, gave it back obviously significantly in the fourth quarter, but nonetheless covered the game. Now this is the same thing. They come off of a home win, only their second outright win of the year. And this, Guns, for me, what this is the mental makeup of the coach and the energy. So oftentimes the letdown comes when teams are not poorly coached from an energy standpoint because they get really high and then they don't sustain. What's the coach's name again? I forget. What's his name?
Dan Campbell. There we go.
Right. Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell, as you saw him in Hard Knocks and the whole thing, but he's the type of guy that takes a win and like juices his guys even further up off the win and really gets the morale and the trust going. And again, that's what you saw in week 3 at Minnesota. Home win, came out really effectively on the road. And I would lean Detroit in this game for that reason. Of course, we're not on this officially, but if you guys are in a free play or a pool, I do think Detroit is in the lean here. You get the ultra revenge, you get the motivation, you get the situational dynamic. And one final point here. Detroit has not traveled particularly well on the road with points. But again, I do think this is important stuff. Those 2 games where people might want to zoom in on this, but I think inaccurately, at New England and at Dallas, that's not a road divisional game. New England has a great defense in the cold. It was their first outdoor game of the year, and then they played a back-to-back road sequence with a bye in between at Dallas. Dallas has a great defense too. So you look at what they did at Minnesota. They went over 52, and you look at the Bears now out of nowhere, just an offensive machine. And as you mentioned, Justin Fields, just an absolutely fantastic athletic prototype. I was watching that game last week against Miami. He had a 65-yard touchdown run. I mean, he made it look effortless. He was running probably, what does he run, like a 4.35 or something? I mean, he's just
he's a running back in a quarterback's body. That's what he is.
I mean, really effortless. He should have been tackled about 5 times before he even got past 10 yards. And it was, but it wasn't like he was just like trucking guys either. He just sort of like glided through them, and it wasn't like Lamar Jackson or Michael Vick. It was just like his unique running style, but he made it look so effortless. So I think you're going to see 2 things here. I think you're going to see a lot of points. And I think you're going to see potentially a really tight game right around the 3. And I do think you have line advantage taking Detroit +3 here. So
yeah, Shaq, you make a good point there. Like you said, week 2, Washington, they won 36-27 at home. Then they played Minnesota, lost by 4, still covered that number. They just beat Green Bay at home. And now they're going on the road and playing at the divisional opponent from the North. So yeah, the situation predicates what you were just referring to there. That's why the number is sitting at 3. So yes, that makes sense. So I think I'm flipping my mentality around what I said before after what you just said. So yeah, I think that Detroit is probably the better angle than the Bears.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. We have these great conversations. It's like, all right, so we throw in a unit on it.
Well, I had to make sure that I let the people know that now I'm in agreement after just what you just said, and I'm looking at my chart here, and I'm like, I completely missed that angle. So yeah, that angle is a lot better than what I was telling before.
Yeah, and again, I do think points as well. I think 48.5 is a line also telling you what I just said. This is going to be an offensive game. There's no way around it. Staying the course here, 1 o'clock, final game on the 1 o'clock slate. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Acrisure Stadium. Saints come here on the road. Saints have played a lot of home games this season, Guns. They're not particularly good on the road, and they have played a lot in their home stadium. Steelers are 2-6. Kenny Pickett, second home game outside of the division. Guns picks, comments, please, and I have a pretty significant angle here.
Listen, TJ Watt's supposed to be coming back this week, which is a huge boost to the Pittsburgh defense. He is the lifeblood. He is the heartbeat of that defense. He is the production as well. I mean, he creates fits. He creates offensive line double teams, which frees up other guys in the blitzes. This is a huge boost for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now you have the Saints going on the road. They have a -5 point differential. Plus 66 net yards. They are coming off a loss versus Baltimore 27-13. -76 yards in that game. Now, to me, they've lost 3. The Saints have lost three out of their last 4. And then you have the Steelers that have lost 6 out of their last 7. And now they're getting at home. Most of those were road games. I think 4 out of the 6 were road games in that spot. I just want to see. It's nothing I want to step in front of because I just want to see how TJ Watt looks and how healthy he is with the pectoral injury. I don't know if that's going to hold up throughout the whole game. If he doesn't play, I would trust the Saints a little bit more. But if TJ Watt is playing, I'm like, man, I was like, we could see the Steelers come out and really chop them up. I haven't seen any life out of the Saints in the last 4 weeks. And it kind of just puts me in one of these weird spots that I don't want to take either side. This is just grab my popcorn, grab my beer, and I'll just watch that game and not have any money on it.
Yeah, we're on Pittsburgh plus 1.5 in the Circa Millions competition, and we looked at this in extreme detail. And obviously, this board, we got a couple bye weeks, so we got to really hone in on the spots. But I think you're seeing a lot of sharp steam on this too. I think it's down to a pick 'em now. And of course, this was 2.5, and then it became 1.5 in the competition. This is going back line, I believe, 2.5 days ago, something like that. Now we're at pick 'em, and you go through Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh is showing some sort of trends here, and just general. I don't know, just general schedule flow, which I think has some transparency. You go back to Kenny Pickett's first appearance. It was week 4, Sunday, October 2nd, against the Jets. And I will say this for the third time in the broadcast. The Jets are not the Jets of yesteryear. The Jets are pretty damn good. So when he comes in at halftime in replacement of Mitchell Trubisky and runs off a very effective second half to make the game very tight to lose 24-20 against the Jets, out of division home game representative. Key point here. Come back home off a blowout loss at Buffalo. Again, out of division. Tampa Bay Bucks come in here. Who's in the NFC South? The Saints. Same thing. Outright win, 20-18 against the Bucks. Now they went on the road, covered at Miami, got hammered in Philadelphia. Again, I think that's a corollary spot. Their 2 blowout losses came against the Bills and Philadelphia, which is potentially a Super Bowl preview. So if you go Super Bowl road teams out of the division hammered, you come home. What is the consistent point? Outside of the division teams in Pittsburgh. And again, you look at New Orleans here. New Orleans is just not a road team. Week 1, non-cover at Atlanta. Week 3, my top play of that week against Carolina, an outright loss 22-14. You guys know how lackluster Carolina is. And then, of course, on Thursday Night Football, week 7, 42-34 against Arizona. You guys know how lackluster Arizona is. So now you come in here off 2 straight home games, first game really in this environment all year. And what I mean by that is not in the division, not in a dome, and not in prime time on a short week. This is their first out of division Sunday 1 p.m. game. And I think it comes in a hostile environment. It's going to be loud. It's going to be cold. It's not where this team functions well. Mike Tomlin and the boys are going to have these guys turned up. We're on it in the Circa Millions competition at plus 1.5. That's it for the 1 o'clock slate. Let's go 4 o'clock, 4 or 5 p.m. We got the Raiders coming back home here. I know people hate the Raiders. I know people have lost money with the Raiders situationally. You have not lost money betting the Raiders if you bet with me, because I know when to bet them. We told you to bet them at home against the Texans. We told you to bet them 2 units at home against the Broncos. And what is the trend here? At home. This team is a home team. They've played a ton of road games so far. We talked about it with the Bills having a lot of road games. This is very similar for the Raiders. They have played 5 road games versus only 3 home games. Again, those 3 home games, they were in complete control against Arizona and melted it. They hammered Denver and they hammered Houston. Their point differential at home is immensely better than it is on the road. They come in here off 2 straight road losses, 2 straight losses and non-covers at the Eastern time zone. They're 0-3 on the road at the Eastern time zone, which is very specific stuff. Now they come back home to where they're comfortable, where they feel good, and they get Indianapolis coming in here with Sam Ehlinger, obviously Jeff Saturday, his first game. I'll have a couple more comments on this. Guns Picks, give me some information here.
Yeah, you said it best. The Raiders are a better home team than they are a road team. They have a plus 7 point differential at home, and they have a -2 net yard average, where on the road they are -8 point differential, -51 net yard average. So you see a complete split in the dynamic there. And also you got to look at, their last 2 home games. They beat Denver 32-23. They beat Houston 38-20. Then they went on 2 back-to-back road games. They got crushed by the New Orleans Saints 24-0. And then they played Jacksonville, which they had the lead. They had full control of the game, or so they thought. And then they let Jacksonville come back into the game and beat them 27-20. So I think there may be a little bit of chip on their shoulder coming back home. They're playing a Indianapolis Colts team that is completely directionless right now. They had to go into the ESPN analyst booth to go grab themselves a head coach and Jeff Saturday after firing their head coach, which to me makes no sense, because if you haven't worked with the players, if you haven't figured out the offense, you don't know the systems that are already in place, why would you just pick a guy off the street? It's like if they put me and Shark in there and expected us to go run the team. It's the same dynamic. I was like, yeah, I know football enough. I could probably tell you to give the ball to Jonathan Taylor. But I mean, as far as the blocking and all the schemes, I don't know how they're going to be able to organize that and give it some sort of direction. Then you have Sam Ellinger. You basically have to trust him in the passing game. That's just not a spot I want to be in right now, especially when you got the Raiders that are a top 10 rushing defense. You can't give the ball to Jonathan Taylor. He is playing in this game, I've heard, and expect results being so one-sided, one-dimensional on the offensive side. I think this is more of a play on the Raiders here. And fading whatever's going on in Indianapolis. I don't know if they're just trying to tank to go get a draft pick or what, but the whole entire move by Jimmy Irsay makes no sense to me. I could only take the Raiders on this one, and it's just a lean.
Yeah, no, this is a tough game. I mean, it really, it's hard to figure out. I mean, I'm looking in the chat. We got Shannon B says, it looks like the team has quit on McDaniels. At this point, I want a top 5 pick and one of the top QBs coming out next year's draft. I wouldn't disagree with you. I mean, when you look at Josh McDaniels, obviously this is his second time as a head coach in the league. With the Denver Broncos, it didn't go particularly well either. And we've discussed this a few times, but it's a very crucial point. Bill Belichick is, he's the leader. He's the king. Kings don't work with other kings. They have guys that work underneath them well. And this is an energy thing. So the key point is here, just because guys were under Belichick in the system doesn't mean they translate well to being the type A guy in another locker room. And I think that's why most of his coordinators have not panned out particularly well. I mean, I can't think of one that's really panned out ever. And this is going back 15 to 20 years. And we were talking about this, I think, at one point. But, Mike Vrabel being one of the only guys that's sort of, above average. But again, key point, he wasn't on the coaching staff. He was an ex-player. And it's just deep psychology. Belichick guys, they're not head coaches underneath them, because that would be a clash for Belichick in his own system. So these guys are not head coaches. They function better under him. And Josh McDaniels, again, just not inspirational. No big energy about this guy. He doesn't have it in him to get in there and really get into the minds of these guys and give them the energy. And that's what's been happening this year. But, you go to the other side of this game. I think it's just hard to buy the Colts. And I think part of it, as you mentioned, is just the lack of vertical passing game and the inability to score the football. This will be Sam Ellinger's third start. Home game against Washington. Washington beat them as an underdog. They only scored 16 points in that game at home. And then they went on the road last week and scored 3 points at New England. Vegas functions well here. It's a terrible game to bet. We're not on it officially. Office pool, I would lay it with the Raiders, but I do not like this game at all. Speaking of not liking a game, but going to the other direction, a game I do like quite a bit. 425, Fox Sports, Lambeau Field. Guns picks. We got the Dallas Cowboys coming in here. -3.5 now. It seems like the Sharps are just loving the Packers today. I got something on this. I'll throw it to you first. Comments, and if it's an official, make it official. If it's not, let's dominate.
Yeah, I was looking at this game trying to find an angle with Green Bay, and probably Green Bay's the spot or pass, but I don't know. It seems like every week you look at Green Bay and you think this is the spot, this is their get right spot, this is where they're going to bounce back, and they can completely continue to disappoint. But you got the Dallas Cowboys coming in, virtually real hot, but they played Chicago and they played Detroit. I mean, those teams are lackluster at best. Maybe Chicago is on the up and up, but you have Green Bay on 5 straight losses, but you got to look at their schedule. I mean, they played in London, went back home, then Washington, then at Buffalo, then at Detroit. So this is the first time they've really had a home game since that 17-point loss to the Jets. And we've continued to say it. The Jets may be a good team now. maybe, 0 point differential at home. That's kind of promising. Plus 80 net yard average. Where when you look at Dallas on the road, plus 4 point differential and only a plus 6 net yard average. So if there's an angle there, it's probably leaning more towards Green Bay in this spot. That's probably the direction I go. Nothing official from me, but if there was any take on this one and someone put a gun to my head, I would probably tell them to take Green Bay. And I also want to bring up this one point because Shannon B is really triggering me with my Notre Dame knowledge. She said Charlie Weiss did all right at ND. No, he did not, because he lost to Navy, which they hadn't lost to in 60 years. And then they lost to a 2-win Syracuse team that got him fired in 2009. It was the worst year Notre Dame had ever had in the history of them. So Charlie Weiss did not do good at Notre Dame. He inherited all of Hunt's recruits and had one good year that brought him to a New Year's Six bowl game. Sorry, I didn't mean to go into college rant. Charlie Weiss stinks, and I hate him.
I agree. I mean, I don't think I agree. It was not representative for him there. And again, I don't think one coordinator under Belichick has done anything really noteworthy at all, ever. And but staying course here, we are on Dallas -4 in the Circa Millions competition. And again, you guys know me very well, capping all different sports. I don't cap in a public direction at all. I don't really look at the market whatsoever. So I'm not sure what the splits are in this game, but I have to assume that the Sharps are on Green Bay because, I mean, when you look at just this significant line movement crossed with the records of these teams, the public is going to be on Dallas. But again, I've been saying this all year. I don't think Green Bay is very good this year. And I don't think that they're going to bounce back, because a crucial point when you bounce back, you have to have a higher average to bounce back to. And I think coming into this season, they absolutely did have a higher average, but I think it's been reset. It's in week 10, and they haven't even played one good game all year. They've played 3 good quarters all year. So you look at that. That's 9 times 4. So they had 36 quarters, and they played 3 good ones. Go back to week 2. They played a great second quarter at home against Chicago to blow them out 27-10, but did nothing the rest of the game. At Tampa Bay, they came out with a very good first quarter. And in London, they also had a very good first quarter. That's it. This team has shown a total lack of sustainability across their entire schedule, and they've shown a lack of sustainability within every single 60-minute game they've played this year. They come in here on an L5. I don't know if it's going anywhere anytime soon. And I think a crucial point here is first of all, you get Mike McCarthy coming back home. I think that's going to be more inspired for his guys to show out for him in Green Bay than it is Aaron Rodgers to beat his old coach with, again, a lackluster locker room environment for the Packers and Matt LaFleur, who honestly is not a big energy guy himself. And one crucial point here in terms of the history of this matchup, I think is very important. If you go through the career of Dak Prescott is 1-3 against Green Bay. He's lost 3 consecutive games to Green Bay. They were all in Dallas, and they were all pretty tight, including a playoff game on January 15, 2017. That game was that game where Aaron Rodgers had just an absolute dime down the left sideline to end up kicking a field goal going away. 34-31 Packers. Later on in the next season, regular season, October 8, 2017, Packers again, a tight one on the road in Dallas, 35-31. And then 2019, Green Bay again, 34-24 at Dallas. And Guns, here's the thing that I'm really looking at here. These games were all very, very similar. 34-31, 35-31, 34-24. So that's very consistent as to what Green Bay of yesteryear did at Dallas. And again, this team is totally, totally different. You get a 3X revenge game. And the only time Dak Prescott has played in Lambeau Field in his career was in his rookie year in 2016. He played very well. Dallas won the game 30-16 as an underdog. And I think he will remember that. Dak's a smart guy. He's an emotional guy. I think he'll remember the comfortability he felt in Lambeau. I think the 3X revenge is motivation. I think Mike McCarthy revenge is motivation. And one final point. This is the first time in a long time Green Bay has been an underdog at home. I think books are telling you a strong line story for Dallas here. And we're on it in the Circa Millions competition at -4. Final game of the 425, sequence here. SoFi Stadium, Inglewood, California. An unfortunate game for many reasons. One, both teams in this matchup have been highly lackluster and uninspiring this year. Cardinals at 3-6 off a playoff run. Rams at 3-5 off a Super Bowl championship. I think the Rams makes more sense from a letdown standpoint. The Cardinals are just in complete shambles. Guns picks, 2 backup quarterbacks, I believe, to even add on to the chaos more. What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be missing Kyler Murray and Matt Stafford in this one. I guess both are listed as out, so we're going to go with the backups. The battle of the backups, as Shannon B just put into the chat. Arizona's going to be starting Colt McCoy, who I feel is a serviceable quarterback. He's a guy that can get wins. He's gotten wins with a lot of NFL teams. So usually when he's stepped up into the moment, he's played well, at least early on, with not having any recent tape on him. But the LA Rams are going to be starting a guy named John Wolford. And I think John Wolford came from Purdue. I know we were talking about it earlier, but his playing experience is lacking. He doesn't really have a lot of snaps as a starter, or he's come into the game in a few spots looking back, I think as far as 2019, but he hasn't really gotten a full game experience as a backup. Now you got to look at the Rams. This is the first contest since their game on the road. They beat Arizona 20-22 as 3.5-point favorites, plus 26 net yard average for the game. Arizona is just a better road team than they are at home. We've talked about this week after week. Every time we see the Cardinals playing at home, they have a plus 55 net yard average and a 0-point differential at home. And the Rams are just not good at home. I mean, they're not good anywhere. If you look at their statistics from a point differential and a net yard statistical analytics, but it's minus 6-point differential at home, 0 net yards. So they play at the level of their competition, but they tend to lose most of those games. Arizona, looking at the trends, 12-4 against the spread in their last 16 road games. The Rams are 2-7-1 in their last 10 games overall. Rams are 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 home games. So I know it's the battle of the backups. I'm basically trusting Colt McCoy over John Wolford here. And I'm going to be riding with the revenge spot in this one. The Arizona Cardinals +3. It's only a unit, but I'm going to be taking them +3.
Okay. I have nothing on this game, so I'm totally deferring to you. When I looked at this game, as I mentioned when I opened the game, a couple minutes ago, this game is just giving me no access whatsoever. 2 backup quarterbacks, 2 teams equally lackluster. As you mentioned, you do get an Arizona revenge game. They did lose in week 3, 20-12 to the Rams at home. But I don't know what's going on here. I think when you look at the Rams, I think a good corollary here, go back to week 8, Rams at home off a bye, obliterated against the San Francisco 49ers at home. Second divisional home game of the year. This is going to be a toss for me. I really got nothing on this one, guys. Run and hide, in my opinion. But Guns picks, final game on the card. Late night, if you will, 8:20 p.m. Not late night, but it's actually happy hour out there in California, Santa Clara, California, Levi's Stadium. 49ers come back home here. Open at -6.5, 7. Now it's 7.5. That, of course, does pass a key number. That's not a great number to bet the Niners. Chargers on the road, back-to-back sequence. Could be tough. Guns picks, comments, and let's discuss.
Yeah, I put a little investment on the 49ers at -7 earlier in the week just because I thought the line was going to move, and it looks like it did hit past the key number 7.5. It's just I know the Chargers are coming off a nice win, late field goal over the Atlanta Falcons, a team that just they're not a good team, and you had to play them relatively close. Week before that, they played at home and lost to Seattle 37-23. So I mean, they're not going to have Mike Williams. They're not going to have Keenan Allen. You have a 49ers team coming off a nice road win versus a team they dominate in the Rams. And they're also coming off a bye coming into this game. So they're well rested, well prepared. And with the Chargers basically is, do you have a running back that can make plays and you have a guy in the running game? And the 49ers do. They have CMC, Christian McCaffrey, and they're playing a Chargers defense that just can't stop the run. They give up 5.7 yards per carry. And I thought they would improve this year after what happened last year where they just couldn't stop the run. And it's just like it's just a steamroll that I don't want to step in front of here. And I did take the 49ers small -7. I haven't made it official. I kind of want to look at a couple things before we get to game time. But I think the 49ers are in a better spot here than taking the Chargers. I just don't trust the Chargers right now.
Yeah, my first takeaway from this game was that I just thought the line was going to be razor sharp. I thought -7 was really potentially a push line. And, when I looked at it, the first thing that stood out to me is this is the second time this year the Chargers have had back-to-back road games. The last time it was week 4 and it was week 5. Key point here was they came off of a win at Houston and went to Cleveland. And the line in that particular game was 1.5, 2, 2.5, depending on when you got the line. And it basically pushed at 30-28. And now, of course, you do get a tough travel spot for them. Maybe not so bad, probably slightly better than at Houston, at Cleveland. This is at Atlanta coming back to the West Coast, which is slightly advantageous. But I do think this line is going to be very tight. Of course, this is only the second home game of the year outside of the division for the Niners. Their only other one was a blowout loss in week 7 to the aforementioned Kansas City Chiefs. But I think that's more so on the Chiefs, as we said before, for some reason, just blowing out teams in the NFC on the road. San Francisco will perform a lot better here. Moral of the story, I don't expect a bad performance from the Chargers. I don't expect a bad performance from the Niners. I think it's going to be a tough game. Jay Money and I had said this. Obviously, late night, some people want to chase to a certain degree. I think it's going to be a push line. But again, guns with an official on -7 there. That's the show for today. It is week 10, Circa Millions, the show. It is the Shark and the Gun. Odds Fellow will be back next week. We want to get him back in here. We love the three-way. And speaking of conversation, we love the chat. Let's build this to the highest level. Dabby Cab, what's going on, brother? CBB Knowledge for College, weekdays in the middle of the afternoon on Sharky Waters Nation on Twitter. Guns picks, official plays for this week. Cleveland +3.5, Jacks +9.5, Denver +2.5. Our competition plays, we have Tampa Bay going right now. I didn't mention that, of course, because it's an old line. It's an old game. Looking pretty good right now, though, 14-3. Of course, this game could reverse. It already looks like Seattle's pushing back in the second half. We have Denver +2.5, Pittsburgh +1.5, Dallas -4. And as I mentioned before, the bye environment with significance. Orchard Park, stand the fuck up. Minnesota Vikings on a dub-7 against all lackluster opponents in the division and a lot of backup quarterbacks. The demolition should begin today for Buffalo at home. Awful loss, and I also lean with significance to Jacksonville on the road at +9.5. The Shark and the Gun, Week 10, NFL, Circa Millions, Guns picks. Close them out with some words, and let's fucking go.
Man, I appreciate all you guys watching us on YouTube. We had over 100 live viewers. So if you haven't been here before, if you haven't seen us before, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the Dad Bods channel so you make sure you can catch us every week, 10 a.m. on Sundays. But I will post my picks later on today just to make sure that everybody understands the unit scale of my plays. And we'll be back on Friday for the college football Knowledge for College that we always do every Friday. So till next time, till then, thanks for joining us. Let's catch some tickets. Let's win some money. And let's keep dancing.